This is group presentation 1 for the Social Data Mining Techniques BDAT 1007, and the topic we chose was cheese market in Canada. The backstory that we came up for the project is the following. A delicatessen store located here in Barrie that usually sells imported cheeses contacted our company because since the start of COVID, they have been struggling with the importation of many products, especially cheeses. So they wanted to know if there is a good variety of cheeses that are produced here in Canada and who are the manufacturers, so they can plan their project of substituting many of their imported cheeses for national ones. And to do that, our team found out that the Canada government website provides this type of data. Before we continue, let's meet the team members. We have, as a business analyst, we have Nicholas, me, Claudio Mendonca, as a project manager, Japa as the data engineer, and Yushin as the data analyst. These are the contents that we have for this presentation. Briefly, summary of the cheese production in Canada, the data model, the tools used, the API, the database storage, and also some crude operations that were used. Cheese production in Canada. As it turned out, we found out that Canada produces more than 1,300 cheeses, and many of them have different characteristics that are considered to classify a cheese, as for example, the type of the milk used, the cheese category, the milk treatment, the fat content, the ripening period, and also the production method. Worldwide cheese production. So how does Canada fit compared to the other countries in the production of cheese? As can be seen in the left, the horizontal bar chart created by Statistic 2021 shows that Canada is the 5th major cheese production. And the fame is not only for the quantity, but also for the quality as well, meaning that our client might not have a problem in substituting some of their international cheeses. So, as mentioned, Canada is ranked as one of the top major countries that produces cheese. The cheese produced in Canada is one of the most renowned internationally for its variety and high quality. And out of curiosity, the variety of cheese that was most produced in last year was cheddar and mozzarella. And as for our data model, our plan was to implement a conceptual model where we could extract from the main data source from the Canadian government site the information related specifically to the product cheese, so the client could define what is the best range choices of cheeses by considering the most important characteristics for them. So we divided in 2 major groups. So for the cheese part, we have, for example, the category. So you can have a fresh, soft, a firm, a semi-soft, a hard, or a veined cheeses. The milk type used for the production of the cheese, it can come from a cow, a goat, a buffalo cow, or even a mix of milks. And milk treatment, it can be raw milk, thermostat, also pasteurized. And beside all the cheeses characteristics asked by the client, they also require information about the cheese manufacturing. As for example, the name of the manufacturer, what type of manufacturing that can be used. For example, it can be farmstead, artisan, or industrial. And also the province of the manufacturing, because they wanted to consider the logistic cost, even here nationally in the Canada territory, remembering that Canada is like a continent size.
Hello, I'm Yuxin Liu, the data analyst in our team. Now I will give you a deeper understanding of our data source. We found the data from this website, as shown here. So this is mainly about the Canadian cheese directories, and it included all the information related to this. So back to here. And to sum up, as Claudio mentioned before, Canada produces more than 1,300 cheeses, and they range from various locations, manufacturers, and even animals. And it was used by the core, goat, buffalo, and ewe milk. Next, I would like to introduce the tools we used for this assignment. First of all, the Visual Studio was used for all coding, and it was also used to create the API key. Second, Postman was used to retrieve the key, and this was also used to opposed to web scraping and Beautiful Soup. Because Postman simplifies each step of building an API and streamline collaboration, so we can create better APIs faster by using the Postman. Last but not least, the SQL was used to store the cheese data from Visual Studio, and it was also used for the CRUD operations. So this is mainly about the data source information and the tools we used. Next, welcome my team member to do the following introduction.
Hello, Professor. I am Jalpalakhani, and API calling and data storage. This portion is done by me in this presentation. So you can see that here, in this slide, I show you this HTTP request code snippet. So how can I get the data from the API? This is the coding for that, and I will show you that code in a Visual Studio. So in this Visual Studio, this is my project, and you can see that this is my startup file. In Visual Studio, the all code start with this thing, and in this configuration, I established the connection with the Azure. So this is my URL that stored the runtime in with the Azure database, and it's end up with the controller. So you can see that it is end up with the controller, and my controller is this home controller. So if I'm going to in home controller, you can see that here is the all coding that and it perform this all, and in this is the it goes in action result, and I'm fetching the data from the web, and it calls at first it clears all the data. So I call the delete all function, and then it goes to the fetch data class. So this is my fetch data class. So you can see that here by using the HTTP request, I call this API, and this API is a JSON format. So you can see that this is my API URL, and I call through this HTTP request class, and by giving the request, I got the response through this, and I save this response in this object, and it gives me in a JSON format, but I need some formatting data to store into my database. So by converting in a serialization and deserialization, I get the data in the formatting style, so I can store it into database. Later I stored my all the data in database. So you can see that this is my query, insert the bulk data. So by inserting this query, I store all this API data into the database. DB is my database object. So by performing this query, I whole list of this cheese directory I store into the database. So I also got this data in my database. This is my database. So you can see that I stored all the data in database, and by fetching this data, I also got this data in Azure database. You can see that this is the Azure database, and by performing this select star from cheese query, I got all the data of cheese. You can see that this is the cheese ID, cheese name in French and English, all this thing. You can see that this is the whole this cheese data. You can scroll that, and then I can also fetch this data from the Azure database on my browser. So I also fetch this get that data to show my in a browser. And if I'm going to run this application, I'm running this one. It takes a little bit time. You can see that here is the list that I got, all the data of cheese. And you can see that this is the ID name in a French and English. Here is the both language. And this is the operation that we can do. You can see that if I want to get the detail of 374 cheese like Godberry, you can see that all the detail of this cheese ID. So this is the all the detail of 374 ID. And if I'm going to back this slide, you can see that I can also delete the record. If I want to delete like a got cheddar, I'm deleting this record, and you can see that 374 got cheddar is gone. And if I want to edit this detail, like if I want to edit it, you can see that I'm editing this one, and I'm edit like this one ABC for the demo. It shows because I performed before the recording. So this is the edit the data. And if I want to delete all this database, and if I want to get it again, so if I perform this refresh, it refresh my database, and delete all the data, and it gives me it fetched the again from the URL. So you can see that this is the data set. I fetched it again, and it has all the query and all the data. You can see this thing. Yeah, all the data. And if I'm going to back in Visual Studio, so this is the solution. And by getting this data, I got the data from the database to my browser. So you can see that this is my data from database to browser, and this is my Azure database. And now back to the slide. This one is next, data storage. This is that same thing that I show you through the code. This is the database, Azure database connection, and this is the data that I use for the insert the data into database. And this is data set. And then now next thing, this is the fetching the data. And you can also see that the thing that when I hosted my data set in the Azure, I get the one URL. So you can see that this URL. So I got the data through the any URL like this URL. You can see that. See, this is the data that same I got by running this application. And when I host on the Azure cloud service, it gives me this URL by hosting. So this is the fetching data, and now the rest of part taken by Nicholas. Thank you, Prof.
Hi everyone, my name is Nicholas Gonzalez, and I'll be taking over the rest of the presentation. So we'll be going over the CRUD operations. Before, Japa showed how all the coding was done, how we retrieved the data, how we stored the data, and how we made our web application. So within the web application, we had the delete and edit functions, and that's essentially the CRUD operations that we made. So we had create, read, update, delete. Here we're showing the CRUD operation. So we start with create. The create and delete coding is very similar. So we can see here that we're getting the database data, DB data, object database. Then we're getting the new get database data. Cheese or chess is just the name of the function that we're using. And then this is where we update. So this is the U of CRUD. Update data, datetime done now. Essentially, we're making the change now. So as we saw with Japa, when she deleted something, it deleted immediately once the page reloaded. So we can see down here that we're using delete, same as before as with create, and the change is happening immediately, and then return to the same page. So the index page, the page where we were showing as Japa showed. So it reloads and just updates the information. And for example, something was deleted. We can see here again, we can see the details. So Japa showed the details of the cheese if we want to see them, and then edit. If we want to change something, we can change something as well. And again, everything is happening immediately. So any change is happening right away. Here's the coding that was used. So we can see here that we had create, we had delete, and then that was essentially what Japa has showed before. This is just the coding for it. So we're getting the database data, so whatever was in that web application that was connected through Azure and Visual Studio, and then anything that happens once the page is reloaded happens immediately. So we can edit the information, we can delete the information, and we can create new information. So as Japa said, for example, we can put ABC, that updates the information, and we can therefore manipulate the data. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for watching. These are all the references that we used throughout the presentation where we got the data, where we got some information about the cheese in Canada, and just overall any information that we used. These are the references again. And here will be the video link to the YouTube video that we will be making.